Tomorrow night, the second to last Republican presidential debate before voting begins is set to take place in South Carolina. But Kentucky Senator and Republican presidential candidate Rand Paul does not plan to be there. Paul is vowing to boycott the debate because Fox Business Network has announced plans to relegate him to the so-called kiddie table, the undercard debate earlier in the evening, due to Paul's low poll numbers. Now, Paul is polling around just 2% nationally, putting him in a three-way tie for 8th place and more than 30 points behind frontrunner Donald Trump. But Paul is appealing to Fox Business to reinstate him into the main debate, citing a new poll showing him in 5th place in Iowa with 5% support. Fox Business says it plans to stand by its decision. I sat down with Paul today, and I started our interview by asking why he thinks he should be on the main stage.
We think the actual polls, if you look at them, show that we should be in the debate. The one thing about polling that I think we confuse is that if you get 5 in a poll and I get 6 in a poll, that I'm somehow much more likely to win the election. But if the margin of error is 3, 5 and 6. See, we're talking about differentiating people on, oh, you got 5.8. Okay. I got 6.2.
But that's a broader, but here's, let me say, it seems to me that that argument should have been made by some of the people in the main debate when they were on the main debate, right? Because it cuts both ways.
It has been, and I've been making it since the beginning, but it's been less important, obviously, when you're in the main debate. But, you know, the perceptions are very important. So is it fair to the voters who support me to say, oh, well, he's a second-tier candidate with 3 weeks to go? We don't accept that. I mean, I was just in Iowa last week. We announced 1,000 precinct chairmen. That's no small feat. I mean, 1,000 precinct chairmen is more than any other candidate has announced. It's a time-worn tradition, right, of presidential candidates to try to see how many precinct chairmen they can get. The last time the winner had 1,100. We have 1,000 with 3 weeks to go. We think we're right in the mix of a very viable campaign. We've raised $25 million. We're on the ballot in 50 states. We see no reason why the media should get to prejudge us.
Let me ask you this about last night. Nikki Haley's response to the State of the Union has proven to be somewhat divisive among people on the right. So I've seen a lot of people with some enthusiasm, a lot of people criticizing her. Which camp do you fall in reaction to that speech?
You know, I think it's important that the Republican Party not be seen as a party that's not welcoming and that wants new people. I've said we need to be a party that has, you know, with earrings, without earrings, with tattoos, without tattoos, black, white, brown, rich, poor. We need to be a more diverse party. And if anything, that's one of the faults of the Republican Party is we're not diverse enough. When we become the old white man's party, which we've been kind of headed towards for a while, we're never going to win another election. So I'm in the camp of saying, yes, we need to be careful of letting the voice of the Republican Party be someone who thinks that all immigrants are rapists or drug dealers.
So this is an endorsement of her approach last night, which was at least rhetorically sort of Big Tent-ish, right, not the loudest voices.
See, I would go even further because I think that Trump is a disaster for the Republican Party and a disaster for the image that would cultivate and bring new people in, but also for those who have a serious approach to how we would defend the country. One of the scariest things of the campaign, and I think has been underreported, is not only did Trump not know what the nuclear triad was, that we have missiles by air, land, and sea, but a week later his spokesman said, our biggest problem is that we have not been willing enough to use our nuclear arsenal. Well, that should scare people to death. Anybody that's gotten beyond the 3rd grade would say, oh, my goodness, we don't want a president that is eager to use our nuclear arsenal. We want one, Republican or Democrat, who's reasonable and restrained and knows that it's a deterrent, but we're not eager to use it by any means.
Well, that sets up nicely, I think, what happened last night with this Iranian situation, which is it was a hairy situation. It does appear that the American ship actually went into Iranian waters. It's still unclear if that's definitive, but it appears that way. They were returned today, although videos released of them in violation of some international law, in fact. I saw a Republican Party that was geared up essentially last night to go to war with Iran. I mean, is that what you saw?
It does scare me because when I see a situation like this, my hope is for peacefully resolving the situation, but also looking for a silver lining. Do I trust Iran? Do I think it's right to parade our soldiers? No. But do I think it's a step forward that a country that we have such an adversarial relationship with returned our soldiers and that we didn't begin a war? Absolutely.
This is why you're having a hard time in the Republican primary. I'm serious. Just saying that, no one wants to hear that.
Well, it depends. There was an interesting poll in Iowa about a year ago, and they said, do you want to be more involved in foreign war like John McCain,
right,
or less involved like Rand Paul? And I think that's a good way to put it, because I'm not saying never. I'm not saying we don't defend ourselves. I'm just saying I want to be less than involved in every damn civil war in the whole world.
Well, and here's what I think is interesting, is that Ted Cruz has managed to marry sort of the rhetorical flourishes of neoconservatism with essentially a substantive argument about not getting involved in a lot of things.
Right. He's been listening to me, I think, on the regime change idea, that regime change is a bad idea, but he needs to understand that most libertarian-leaning people like myself, we're not really excited about making the sand glow or carpet bombing either, because the problem with carpet bombing, it implies indiscriminate bombing,
yes,
and the problem with indiscriminate bombing is for everyone you kill, the ones that are maimed and left may well be the next generation of terrorists.
Let me ask you about something in your home state. Governor Matt Bevin, an ally of yours, I think it's fair to say, Tea Party activist, businessman, now the governor. He just announced he's going to pull the state, they're going to shutter the state's Obamacare Exchange Connect, right?
Right.
Now, my understanding of your theory of governance, which I think, you know, there's a lot to, is basically the government that's closest to the people is best. You want to devolve back to the states as much as possible. Well, here's an opportunity where you've got this thing. It could be run by Kentuckians, or it could be run by these so-called bureaucrats in Washington, and the Tea Party governor has decided to hand it over from Kentuckians and give it to Washington. That makes no sense to me.
Well, I guess we would see a third option. So we would say the federal government could control health care, the state government could control health care, or actually the marketplace could control health care.
Right, but that's not the choice right now. Obamacare is the law of the land. You get two options. I mean, literally, this is the options.
And
you're the governor. You get to decide whether the state runs it or the federal government runs it.
But that's part of our objection to Obamacare. And in fact, my main, if I could put all of my objections into one sentence, my objection to Obamacare is that it made it illegal to purchase inexpensive insurance. And I think it's important for people to know that, because what happens under Obamacare is, if I want a high deductible plan that covers nothing, but I want an inexpensive plan, President Obama decided in advance that I'm not smart enough to make that decision.
The Kentuckians, though, are still going to be dealing with bureaucrats in Washington and not their fellow Kentuckians when they sign up for Republican. Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky, candidate for the GOP presidential nomination. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Come back again.